Mic 1, mic 1. Mic 2, mic 2. Mic 3, mic 3. Mic 4, mic 4. Mic 5, mic 5. Mic 6, mic 6. Mic 7, test mic 7. Mic 8. Mic 9. Mic 10. Mic 11. Mic 12. 13. 14. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. Mic 20. Mic 20. Mic 21. Check 1, 2.
Good evening. Is that? I am. Good evening. Since 5 p.m., the board has been in closed session to consider the following. Discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes. The appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. Collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives. Litigation, when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal. And the selection of a person to fill a public office, including a vacancy in a public office when the district is given power to appoint under law or ordinance. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are in open session. Good evening, and welcome to the February 16th board meeting. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Donna Wanke, Charles Kush, Joe Kuzminski, Paul Leong, and Christine Gerke, and Donna Wanke.
Okay, please join the Board of Education in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have reached the point in our agenda for good news.
Okay. We'll begin with presidential scholar candidates. 9 students from District 203 have been selected as candidates for the United States Presidential Scholars Program. The program was established in 1964 by executive order of the President to recognize and honor some of the nation's most distinguished graduating seniors. Scholars are chosen for leadership and service to school and community. They demonstrate exceptional scholarship, visual, creative, performing arts talent, and accomplishment in career and technical fields. Up to 161 U.S. presidential scholars are chosen annually. If circumstances permit, all scholars will be invited to Washington, D.C. in June for the National Recognition Program, featuring events and enrichment activities, including the Presidential Scholars Medallion presentation during a White House-sponsored ceremony. Congratulations to the following students. From Naperville Central, the students are Brandon Hager, Simeon Lee, Elizabeth Liu, and Colin Yao. Students from Naperville North are Tyler Dittmars, Andrew Lee, Rachel Shee, Catherine Watson, and Christopher Zhao. Congratulations to those students. And then we will recognize the Naperville North Science Bowl, who won the state tournament for the 6th straight year. The North A team won first place in the Illinois State Science Bowl, and will be competing in the National Science Bowl at the end of April. This year, the tournament will be held virtually with moderators from all across the country. The students earned $500 for their school and a chance to become the first school in Illinois to win the National Science Bowl. The Naperville North C team took second place, and the Naperville North B team took third place, so a clean sweep for Naperville North. Congratulations to the Science Bowl team, Coach Colin Farrell, and the team, Jeffrey Wu, Judson Lamb, Nick Liu, Henry G, and Kevin Cow. Congratulations to those students on your remarkable accomplishment. That's our good news.
That is indeed good news. All right, we have reached the point in our agenda for public comment. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public at its meetings. Citizens who wish to address the Board of Education should identify themselves by name and home address. Comments by individuals shall be limited to 3 minutes. If the individual is representing multiple individuals or a group, they shall be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. Issues raised in public comment will be taken under advisement by the Board of Education, but will not be discussed this evening. Issues raised during public participation may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff. The superintendent is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment, along with his staff, and will apprise the board accordingly. As outlined in Board of Education Policy 2.230, individuals addressing the board should conduct themselves with respect and civility toward others. Individuals are free to express their criticism regarding decisions or policies, but the Board of Education requests that they refrain from personal attacks on our superintendent, Board of Education members, and administrative staff. At this point, I would like to welcome Chris Peters. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. I'm Chris Peters. I live at 2690 Sun Valley Road in Laya. Good evening, Mr. Superintendent and Board of Education. As a parent of 3 elementary-age children here in Naperville District 203, I must admit that I continue to be truly saddened by the current state of the educational experience being provided to children in our community. As parents, we've consistently made effort to cooperate and communicate with teachers and administrators in all the effort of providing the most basic educational opportunities to our children, the most foundational of life skills. However, in far too many situations, we're substituting experiences of what should be cherished and remarkable times in life with unacceptable and embarrassing educational experiences, ill-prepared educators, and administrators and board members gripped with a biased and poorly considered belief of what is best for our children and educational community. This community and I have waited patiently for 11 months now for a solid plan, firm guidelines, and hard numbers to provide us with the ability to know what hurdles really need to be passed to send our children back to school completely. And all that we seem to have at this point is a minuscule graphic filling less than half a page in the 37-page Return to Learn guide, a graphic with no details, no numbers, no hard criteria that we can trust that you, the Board of Education, are following and aiming to achieve. It seems to me that this guide would better be named the Trust Us, We'll Know When We Know guide. As a husband of a public school teacher and a father of 3 small children, I'm acutely aware of what is at stake here. I'm pleading for the board to consider the educational welfare of our students, the needs of our parents, and the future of the community that will result from your decisions. We're not fighting the enemy many of us would like to think we're fighting. We are not fighting the virus. What we're fighting here is fear. A fear hammered into our community by the media, politicians, and public figures. Make no mistake, COVID will make a terrible and lasting scar upon the lives of our children and our community. However, it will not be a scar of countless children taken too early by a virus, but one of the impactful failures of our educators and administrators to accept responsibility and get our kids in school and serve them as they committed to do when they chose their careers. It will be a scar of emotional damages that evidence themselves in many ways seemingly small, but collectively detrimental. Everything from the lack of physical exertion to the inability of parents to replace a highly educated teacher in curriculum development, each small break works to weaken each child. We are one of the families who has to choose between going to work or staying at home to do 50% of the job of the teachers they're depending on for educational expertise. The quality of the education a child receives is now dependent on how much effort a parent wants to put in to supplement and create.
Time.
Okay. On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Rick Fortmo. Okay. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Rick Ertmode. I live at 132 Elmwood Drive here in Naperville. And I'm certain that tonight you'll hear from some people with some great ideas that are backed by data surrounding the logistics of moving our children back to a more normal educational experience. And I sincerely hope that you'll listen to those people with open minds. If I look familiar, it's because back in November, I came and spoke and expressed my displeasure with what I found to be the potential for a conflict of interest of someone who is now a former member of the Board of Education as she campaigned for higher office. The fact that said former member sat in her position so that her replacement could be chosen instead of voted upon by the people you supposedly serve raised my eyebrow just a little bit. And while I know there have been interviews with people looking to fill that seat, there are many here in Naperville who will be surprised if that seat is filled by anybody who hasn't already been pre-selected. Now, I'm not so naive to think that stuff like this doesn't go on. In fact, there's a name that many people would call it. It's politics, or more locally, it's the Chicago way. But the truth is, I don't live in Chicago. I live here in Naperville, which is supposed to be one of the best places in America to raise a family. And part of that reason is because we have this supposedly esteemed school district. I know no laws have been broken, but once again, like I did back in November, I'm going to read that second standard and principle in the Code of Conduct that's put forth by the Illinois Association of School Boards. I will avoid any conflict of interest or the appearance of impropriety which could result from my position, and will not use my board membership for personal gain or publicity. Now, no one's going to bat an eye if any of you receive tickets to North Central College football game or somehow some sponsored tickets to Last Fling find their way into your hands, but for me at least, there will never be another decision that any of you make where I don't think to myself, what's in it for them? And in the context of today's conversation regarding opening our schools, I'm going to continue to think, what's behind your decision and what's in it for you, while our children continue to suffer. What I'm about to say is unfortunate because you are all accomplished individuals and you seem to be decent people. I'm going to say it collectively, but I want each one of you to take it individually. I don't trust you. Whether you have the ability to gain personally from your decisions is irrelevant to me at this point. I don't trust any of you to have the guts to do anything besides be so falsely positive that it's nearly a laughingstock of most of the community. I certainly don't trust you to do what's best for the children of Naperville. Now I hope you do something, anything, to change my mind. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Nathan Gurin. Good evening and welcome.
Nathan Gordon, 2247 Lotus Court, Naperville. Just this to be short and sweet. Miami-Dade, the fourth largest school district in the country, is open. They've been open successfully. My nieces in St. Charles have been going to school this whole time successfully. You guys are all smart people. Let's figure this out. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Josh McBroom. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Josh McBroom, 277 Winding Creek Drive here in Naperville. I was planning on coming and just listening, but thought maybe I'd just speak, and I want my voice heard. You know, I've emailed you guys. I don't have anything prepared because I wasn't planning on speaking, but I'll just kind of say what's on the top of my head. Kids not being in school, and I'm not alone here, I thought it was irrational last year. I thought it was an incredible risk-reward miscalculation. We're not dumb people. We can see the numbers. And you're not a virus denier if you believe that. I've had COVID. My whole family's had it. I maybe know 50 people that have had it. It's a real thing. But the risk-reward to children is obvious. And I see the board, you know, we see other schools that are open and handling this, and I just see the board hiding behind guidelines, which are guidelines. And we all know you do have the power to create your own metrics. This can be done. I think kids should be full-time right now, but I'm willing to suck it up through the end of this year. If kids are not back in school 5 days a week in the fall, you're going to see a mass exodus. We're on waiting lists for private schools. We're thinking about my wife quitting her job as a 203 teacher to homeschool our kids and looking at all kinds of options, and we're not alone. So you got to figure it out. Like the previous speaker said, you're all smart people. Figure it out, please. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Anthony Sabine. Good evening and welcome.
Thanks. Tony Sabine, 619 Fredericksburg Court, Naperville. That guy kind of took the words out of my mouth. I like that he was quick. I mean, he made a good point. You guys are supposed to be leaders, but you're not leading. Leaders are supposed to step up and do something from the front, not sit back and watch every other school district around you go back with positive results while you sit on your hands and do nothing. I just don't understand that. This school district has resources that dwarf every other school district around here, yet you've done nothing. We don't even have desk protectors. We don't have anything that would indicate that you have any intention of going back anytime soon. And to me, I just don't understand it. My job transferred me temporarily to Georgia for the first half of the school year. I was down there. My kids were in a school district larger than 203. They were in full time. And guess what? The world didn't end. I think maybe there were 3 or 4 COVID cases the whole time. And again, I'm not a COVID denier. But at what point do we draw the line and say, yeah, this is not beneficial? Our kids are suffering. They're missing out on education. Their mental health is suffering. They're missing out on sports. The kids that are older are missing out on scholarship opportunities. All the work that they put in, all the effort and time that they put in to master a sport, to master some sort of a trade that they can use to get a scholarship goes to waste. Meanwhile, other school districts all over the country that are in full time get their kids a leg up because they're in full time and their kids are practicing sports and their kids are getting real in-person education. My kids in elementary school, they're not getting anything out of online school. You take a second grader or a kindergartner and put them in front of a computer, they're not learning. That's a waste of time. And then all the rest of it falls on the parents. So I would personally rather risk my kid going to school and getting COVID and quarantining him for 2 weeks with the gain of having an education. And I guarantee you I'm not alone on that front either. So, like I said at the beginning, you guys are leaders. You're supposed to be leaders. I ask that you start to lead and figure this thing out. That's all I got.
Thank you for your comments on behalf of the whole board. Okay, I would next like to call Carrie Hernandez.
Hi, my name
Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Carrie Hernandez. I'm at 1644 Estate Circle. I don't have anything prepared purposely because I'm wondering if I can ask a couple of questions of the board. How many of you have children in the district?
Okay, as I mentioned in my previous comments, this is not an exchange. We don't respond to public comment during the public comment, but we will respond. Our superintendent is our designee to respond.
Mike, the reason I ask, and I'm not exactly even expecting an exchange back and forth, is just because for the people who don't have children in this district isn't affecting you. For the children or for the people who have kids that are older, this district is not affecting you. And my curiosity runs why did the board not make a decision and leave it all up to the superintendent? We voted for the board for a reason, for a job to be done collectively, not actually pass it off because you didn't feel like making a decision. It's unfair to the parents, it's unfair to the kids, and it's unfair to the superintendent. And it's actually unfair to all of you because no one let their voice be heard. And I'm wondering, did you do that because you actually feel the same way that we do? And you didn't want your voice heard either? And anyone being stomped on because of it? One of the things that we pride ourselves on in this district is no bullying. That's all we get. School. My son has issues with anxiety. My son has had problems with depression. This has not helped him at all. And you know what? I blame you guys now for the sheer fact that he was doing great. He was out of therapy and now back in. And the problem is there's no socialness, nothing. I mean, you guys know that that is an important factor in a child's life. It saddens me, and it actually made me question myself as a mother. That is an awful feeling, terrible. And I know I'm a good mother. And when those boys, all those boys and my son and his friends in 8th grade when they graduated, one of the discussions I actually heard at my house through the computer was 5 boys sitting there saying that they felt like they got cheated. They're being left behind, and then they're going to get left behind again freshman year. They already knew it. At graduation time, they already knew it. That was the craziest thing for me to listen to as a parent walking in a room and hearing 5 boys talk about that. So you know that it's not just 5 boys talking about it. It's other students that were at 8th grade level.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Okay. I would next like to call Gracia Livier. On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments.
Hi, Gracia Livy.
Welcome.
368 Larchmont Court. We've made it to February, nearly a year into this, and now we have some data. 2 key points. Schools are safe environments, and in-person learning is far more efficacious than remote learning. The time has arrived to open our schools for full in-person learning now. The best way to earn trust of our district families is to show them that the school is safe, to open our buildings and establish an empirical track record of safety, while families still have the option of remote learning. If we hope for our schools to be open in full-time next fall, and that I believe is everyone's hope, and for all families to feel comfortable in the building, our best chance for success will be if we begin to ramp up now. Immediately, bring our youngest learners back to full-time in-person learning. My focus, of course, as a parent of 4 young children is for those K-2 to early elementary, the early childhood kids. I have a child with a lifelong disability who needs the support that a public school offers. My focus is to get our youngest students in first. I spoke to a 203 elementary teacher today who asked that I talk to you because she didn't want to go public, but she said we need to have our youngest learners back in. The kind of learning that she's seen comparatively to 2 years ago is very underwhelming and ineffective. That's what she said. Structured learning needs to go back to full-time. Early childhood IEP students need that 5th day that's been so successful to their education in the past. Just remember, the principles of childhood development haven't just vanished because we're in a pandemic. We owe it to our kids to reconsider these adult-level mitigation standards we've imposed on them in schools and on playgrounds. There has been so much recent evidence produced that it is well past time to balance any public health requirements with children's known risks, the impact on their ability to learn, their psychological well-being, and critical development needs and milestones, particularly because they lack the sovereignty to advocate for themselves. It's our duty as parents and adults to not only protect the younger generation, but also to do as much as possible to ensure that they thrive. Just because kids are compliant and resilient, and wow, hats off to our kiddos, we should be careful not to accept something without weighing the potential consequences and actual needs of these little kids. I believe being overly cautious now is risking the stakes of next school year. So parents, if you're listening, please make voting in the April school board election your highest priority.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Dan Bukowski. Good evening and welcome.
I'm Dan Bukowski. I live at 702 South Wright Street. I didn't make any prepared remarks. Just hearing so many people talk about the upcoming elections. The other day I got some postcards in the mail from so many people seeking re-election. You talked about how much you care about the kids, this, that, and the next thing. You didn't talk about your accomplishments. What kind of accomplishments have you had? You're sitting there playing on your computers, you're not listening to the parents that are here? What kind of accomplishments do you have? All you did is you passed the buck to the superintendent. He's made a lot of decisions that I disagree with, and he's been a disappointment, but you guys have not stood up for anything. How can you look yourself in the mirror and expect people to vote for you for re-election if you're not even going to make a decision? Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I would next like to call Tina Bukowski. Okay. Yep. All right. I do not have any additional people signed up for public comment. Does anyone? Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name's Sarah, 1644 Riparian Drive, Naperville. I was not planning to speak. When I hear of teachers in 203 that are sending their kids to private school, it makes me angry. And that's all I have to say. The teachers in your district don't even have the faith in what you're doing.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. I think I had one additional hand here. Yeah. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. Lisa Grimes, 2100 Countryside Circle. I work at Linden Oaks, and I just want to be a voice to the patients that I'm going to see tomorrow, the teenagers who have no hope. And I want you to tell me, what am I going to tell them? What do I say to them? What hope do they have? Can I tell them that they're going to go back in the fall? They are in their rooms self-injuring. They are suicidal. They are developing eating disorders. The list can go on. We are busting at the seams. Now, I have talked to my supervisor. If you guys would like me to arrange someone to come in and talk with you about the ramifications of your decisions, we are more than happy to do that. We are fighting for the lives of the teenagers in our community. You have to see what's going on. This is the flippin' Twilight Zone, okay? Things have to change. You are killing the kids, locking them up. They need to get back to school. Full time, you're hearing the parents. This is real. This is real. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Evans. I'm at 552 Truman Street. 11 months ago, you sent my children home from school. You said to stay home 2 weeks to flatten the curve. In 11 months, my children have spent 27 and a half hours in a classroom. That's less than 5 full school days in 11 months. This is not the education that my children are guaranteed, and this is not the education that they deserve. We bought our home here in this district, in School District 203, because it was supposedly one of the best in the nation. What an embarrassment. Dan Bridges, School Board District 203, you have failed our children. Literally, our children are failing classes. Our kids are dealing with anxiety and depression, eating disorders and self-harm. They are disinterested in school, and they are untrusting of our district and our community. I listened one morning to the school announcements over Zoom. I listened as my kids were preached to about their commitment to be present, to be listening and watching, their commitment to themselves, their teachers, their classmates, and their school family. We no longer attend morning announcements. I refuse to have my kids lectured to about commitment when the very people we put our trust in, those that signed up, volunteered, committed to taking care of our children have let them down. We are not peasants, and we refuse to be appeased by the crumbs you are tossing us. 2 hours, 4 days a week is unacceptable. You had more than $10 million to figure it out. You've had nearly a year to figure it out. Get our children in school full time. We want a legitimate plan of action. No more made-up numbers that change every month. Give us a plan. Tell us how you will get our kids the education that they deserve. At this point, just tell us if you don't have one. Myself and many with me have weathered the storm. We are tired, we are angry, we are sad. If you can't offer anything, at least tell us the truth. Tell us that you have no plan so that we can move on while there is still real estate available in districts that actually care about their students. Thank you.
On behalf of the whole board, thank you for your comments. As we finish our public comment period, I want to thank each of our participants on behalf of our whole Board of Education. We appreciate your advocacy for your children. I also want to acknowledge the many public comments submitted by email from many of our community members. We also appreciate your advocacy. I want to assure each public commenter, regardless of the format in which you have commented, your concerns have been heard by the Board of Education. I also want to take a minute to thank all of those who are emailing their thoughts and questions to the board. We read and review each email and value them greatly. At this point, there are some times when, due to the volume of email, we are not able to respond in a timely way to each one. However, each of these emails is read and considered. We thank you for taking the time to keep us informed, and we consider you to be a vital part of the process of reflecting the views of our community. As a reminder, our designee to respond to public comment is our superintendent in coordination with his staff, and he will apprise the board accordingly. As our superintendent has outlined, questions raised in public comment are answered for our whole community in the frequently asked questions section of our webpage. I also want to note that included in our public comment section in board docs is correspondence from our legal counsel mentioned by our superintendent at our last Board of Education meeting, which confirms our legal counsel's opinion regarding the lack of a conflict of interest in board member Donna Wanke's employment with State Rep Janet Yangrohr. This will conclude our public comment period. So we will go now in our agenda to item 6, the monthly reports. Listed in our monthly reports are Treasury report, investments, insurance, and budget. Does any member of the board have questions about our monthly reports? Okay. So then we will go on to action by consent. I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
I move to approve item number 7.01, the warrant number 1030651 through warrant number 1031078, totaling $19,454,363.51 for the period of January 20th, 2021 to February 16th, 2021. And in addition to that, consent items 7.02 and 7.03.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Leong,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Gerke. Aye. Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So
I just want to thank the Finance Department for going through all of my questions on bills and claims and providing a timely response to all of them. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we will move on in our agenda to communications, and we will start with item 8.01, Student Ambassador Reports. Who would like to go first, Shay or William?
I'm going to go first. So at Naperville North, over the last month, we did our sophomore SOS training, which means we have now done freshmen and sophomores, and we'll go on to juniors and seniors later in the year. We also started our basketball, swim and dive, dance, cheer, girls gymnastics, badminton, and boys bowling seasons. And it's really nice to have a little bit of normalcy alongside the return to hybrid schooling. And we're pretty optimistic about the end of the year, including events that we traditionally have for seniors like prom and air band, and hope that we can find a way to put them on before the year comes to an end. Thanks.
Thank you, Shay. William, tell us what's happening at Naperville Central.
All right, so similar to what Shay said, we have a lot of sports that are going on right now. So boys basketball, girls badminton, boys and girls bowling, and boys swimming. All of these have been practicing and competing right now. Most extracurriculars, however, that can operate online are still operating online. For example, the state tournaments of chess, DECA, debate, and several others are or will be held online. As for hybrid learning, I'm just going to talk a little bit about like how that's been, just to give an idea of what that's been sort of like. So as a senior, what I've seen in my classes in terms of the number of students online versus hybrid, it sort of varied a lot by class. So for most, I would say that I've seen most classes have been around 3 to 5 students, with some being closer to 10 to 15 students on a given day. But I've also talked to some junior and sophomore students, and they've had similar numbers but higher on average. I'm not sure how representative these numbers are, but that's just sort of what I've gathered. I've also heard a lot of variance in how hybrid has been from the students that I've talked to. So from what I've gathered, it's varied a lot by like the class. In some classes, it hasn't seemed to make much of a difference. So like, for example, in a lot of math or English classes, like students just enter class and then they open their computers and then they like join Zoom. So it's essentially, they're still Zooming, but in a different environment and like with masks on. But in other students or in other classes, it's been pretty different, such as like PE, for example. Understandably, the in-class experience has been very different than what they were doing online. So yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you to both of you for those updates about what's going on at Naperville North and at Naperville Central. Okay, we will go on in our agenda to written communications. Listed in board docs are the Freedom of Information Act requests that we have received for your review. So then we will go on to item 8.03, Superintendent Staff School Report.
Well, good evening. At this time, we'll take the opportunity to update the Board of Education and Community on our Return to Learn plan. If I could have Rich bring this presentation forward, please. Just a couple comments since we had to address this today. There were some of the written, in the written public comments before we get into this regarding decisions regarding weather. And you know, back in the old days on to cancel school, or in this case, to transition to remote. There's some belief out there that there's a magic number of inches of snow that must fall, or a temperature that we must reach in order to make that decision. The reality is there are multiple factors that are at play in making a decision, such as the one today, to go to remote learning fully. Primarily, our concern is the safety of our staff and our students to be able to attend and to get to school safely. The decision that was made today that the conditions for the roads would not be favorable for that to be done safely. In addition, based on the amount of snowfall and nowhere really for the snow to go, we had a number of sidewalks that were obscured, inability for our walkers to safely walk to campus, concern about some of our student drivers as well, and so kind of looking at that in addition, while our buildings and grounds crew did an amazing job this morning, we're in the parking lots getting our lots cleared beginning at 3 o'clock this morning. We had some concern regarding some blowing and drifting and blocking entrance and exits, and the ability to get those clear before it was time for attendance at school. So as we see some of the roads right now, very favorable, looking much better. Still a lot of snow in places that needed to be cleaned up. So not a magic number of inches, it's really about the timing of when it falls, how much snow is already there, the temperature, and a lot of things that go into play with that. I am in regular communication with the city of Naperville and other surrounding municipalities, as well as other superintendents around the county, as well as our buildings and grounds and operations team to make those decisions. Regarding temperature, and we have experienced some tough temperatures right here. Again, there's not a magic degree that we have to reach. We look at a number of things like the actual air temperature, wind speed, and the feels-like temperature, and the potential for frostbite or on a student for exposed skin over a period of time. So multiple factors do go into it. I know the shift for a lot of families today is difficult. You know, anytime you make the shift from a attendance day to a snow day, it's a very difficult shift to have to make. And I know today is, again, also a shift that has to be made as well. We recognize, and I apologize for that, but the reality is that unfortunately we make the decision when we think it's right. My preference is to make the decision as late as possible, based rather on a forecast on what actual conditions are like. It'd be very rare for me to really make a decision early, a day before. Many of my colleagues in surrounding counties may have done that, and some that, a lot of us in DuPage County waited till today. So just there were a lot of questions about that. I got a couple calls today. I just wanted to be able to address that. It's a conversation annually I have with the general home and school presidents so that they're aware as they work with their parent population. So just a little bit of information there for you as I was really kind of getting ready for the setup here of the presentation. Rich, if we just start on the next slide, please. We're going to just again update the Board of Education and Community tonight regarding our return to learn stages. As a reminder, made up of 4 stages. Right now, we're currently in stage 3. Just want to say that our goal continues to be to get students to full in-person instruction as quickly as we can. I'm very pleased with the progress we have been making, and based on the progress we're seeing, I am confident, if not optimistic, that we will begin the process of identifying more students to come in more frequently, and I am very optimistic about the fall of being in a position to returning to full instruction, at least as an option for some of our students. We continue to monitor our health metrics, and as best we can, and all of our metrics currently, as you can see, fall within the green category. The community positivity rate continues to trend down, and as of Monday is just slightly above 3%. Our PPE and cleaning supplies continue to be at the adequate levels. Our COVID screening results indicate a low instance of asymptomatic individuals attending school, with less than 0.5% of samples indicating a presumptive positive finding. There have been no concerns with the wearing of face masks and maintaining social distancing while students are participating in in-person instruction. We have seen a decline in the number of staff who are unable to report to work due to COVID-related issues, which allows our staffing levels to be sufficient. Again, we have more information on our COVID dashboard, and as I indicated on the first slide in my first comments, because of this and because of where we are with the metrics, I remain very positive and optimistic about our ability to begin to gradually look at additional students to be served and supported in person more frequently. As you may know, the CDC released new guidelines on Friday. We are currently in the process of reviewing them and unpacking them to great detail to determine what, if any, impact they will have on adjusting our plans and our metrics and our mitigation strategies moving forward. Just a quick update on COVID surveillance testing. Our COVID screening is being fully implemented. We have continued to see the number of students and staff who have opted into the testing increase slightly. We're still not at the 70% we indicated early in this process that we would like to be at. We continue to promote through social media and principal-directed emails to our families. However, we are meeting the benchmark set within the new CDC guidelines of minimally testing 10% of those that of your population. So we are well above that currently. As we have finished 3 weeks of testing, like I mentioned a moment ago, we continue to have less than 0.5% of samples identify individuals in need of additional testing. And while this is great news, we have some areas that we are looking at for continued improvement. We're seeing that not all participants who opt in are providing a weekly sample. Sometimes they forget or haven't done so. And additionally, as we're processing samples, we're finding that not all participants are remembering to put the labels on the test tube, which means we can't run the sample. And some individuals are placing labels horizontally on the test tubes, which means it's difficult to scan at the lab. So some areas that we need to continue to address there. In order to help address these issues, the communications department is providing each school with a communication kit. It will include ways to remind students and staff when it is their scheduled day to bring in saliva samples. Additionally, it'll be to include reminders on how to put the unique barcodes onto the test tubes. I just referenced a minute ago, and as you may know, the CDC updated their guidance for reopening schools on Friday afternoon. We have read the new guidance and are currently in the process, as I mentioned earlier, of unpacking how it will influence our day-to-day practices. The good news and encouraging news for us is that many of the adjustments the CDC made and the adjustments that we made in January are highly aligned to the new recommendations. We see a lot of the things what the CDC has come out with that in place in our current plans. The CDC continues to identify 3 essential elements that need to be in place to safely reopen and remain open for in-person instruction. However, they have made some adjustments to the details and provide some much needed clarification in some other areas. So they continue to focus on the importance of layering mitigation strategies and the need for consistent implementation. In addition, they've clarified that schools should prioritize face masks and social distancing, including the use of cohorts or pods, which again makes larger school settings more difficult because of the number of pods and students to come in for more in-person instruction. Monitoring of the community transmission continues to be a core element, but they have adjusted how the metrics are monitored. They are moving away from reviewing the 14-day rolling averages and instead have based guidance on 7-day rolling average. Additionally, they are recommending that both health metrics be taken into consideration when determining community transmission, not just one, as had been in past guidance. CDC's recommendations continue to call for a phased-in approach where mitigation strategies and learning modes are based on the level of community transmission. They have made the following adjustments. The phases have been reduced from 5 to 4 categories. Health metrics have been adjusted to reflect the use of the 7-day rolling average. And they've differentiated guidance for schools that have a COVID testing or screening program in place, allowing for hybrid instruction even when community transmission is at a higher level. Finally, the updated framework identifies that 6 feet of distance is required when community transmission is high or substantial and should be done to the greatest extent possible when the community transmission is low or moderate. In addition to 3 core elements, they've identified 2 secondary strategies: COVID testing and vaccines. These provide an additional layer of protection for schools. For COVID testing and screening, they provide guidance on how to best approach that. So we had some public comment earlier about kind of our changing of metrics and approaches. Again, as you've seen, updated guidance as we learn more about the virus, science becomes more clear. As we continue to move forward, there are updates to guidance and metrics and that we review and look at. And so we are consistent. And again, there are multiple layers of agencies that we have to align with, from the CDC, the Illinois Department of Public Health, to Page County Health Department, and others. In addition to the 3 core elements, they have identified 2 secondary strategies: COVID testing and vaccines. These do provide an additional layer of protection for schools. For screening programs, the CDC recommends testing should be done when community transmission is high, substantial, or moderate levels. Testing should be done at least weekly. And then, as I mentioned earlier, at least 10% of students should be screened. And finally, they indicate that testing should be voluntary. And actually, the CDC states it would be unethical to make the testing required. So that is a conversation that we've also had as well. Currently is an opt-in process that we have here. Finally, CDC addresses vaccines, indicating that is an additional protection, but not necessarily required to reopen schools. I remind schools that a fully vaccinated staff member must continue to implement all the mitigation strategies, including wearing a face mask and implementing 6 feet of social distance. And the CDC encourages schools to work with the health department to support messaging and outreach with families once the vaccine is widely available. We will continue to review these recommendations, and we'll make adjustments to our return to learn plan where appropriate. Again, the new guidance for us, we believe that the guidance is really aligned to a lot of the work that we are doing. We will will be updated regularly as new information becomes available. We'll likely, again, make some additional updates. I'm going to transition to Dr. Knowlton here for an update on the COVID vaccine and where we stand with that. Again, we've had some public comment and both written comment and others about the availability of the vaccine to educators. Rich, if we can go to the next slide, please. That is something that Dr. Knowlton is continuing to monitor. I will express my kind of frustration with the lack of availability, which isn't necessarily a local problem, it's a national problem. And while CDC says it's not a requirement, or it's just a portion of it, I think it is a layer of the mitigation that is very important to, especially in our larger settings where we're bringing more individuals together. Dr. Knowlton is leading our work on the vaccine and the securing of the vaccine, so I'll turn it over to him for an update.
Sure, just a couple quick comments. We're happy to know that many of our staff are actively pursuing access to the vaccine through a multitude of channels in the community. One of those being Edward Elmhurst Health, which has facilitated access for many of our teachers and other staff in this district. I continue to ongoingly pursue access through Osco Pharmacy as well as Meyer Pharmacy. We're running into the third bullet, which really reflects the issue nationally and locally. Like Mr. Bridges referenced, the scarcity, the lack of supply, the lack of volume is what we're running into. We have partners that are ready, willing, and able to go forward with setting up mass vaccination clinics on site in schools. The simple issue is that there's not available vaccine at this point. We're hearing some hopeful news that some of this will be provided through federal routes rather than relying solely on the county health department. And then lastly, I know I said this before, but anybody who's listening, watching, or interested, if you fall into the 1B category, do everything you can to take a shotgun approach towards accessing vaccine. I've listed some of the common resources up there. I wouldn't put my eggs in one basket. I'd try through as many as possible channels. You're not bothering anybody by doing this. You're setting yourself up for success and trying to maximize the likelihood of access.
And before I talk about communication, I will simply say that I know, to the board, you may have seen in newspapers, social media, and other print reports, or media reports about some districts within our county, districts in other counties, saying that they're able to secure mass vaccination sites in order to vaccinate their staff. It hasn't happened here, not because of a lack of willingness, readiness, preparation, and just having all systems in place in order for us to do it. It really comes as a result of really not an articulated or clear plan from the state level down to the local level, perhaps even the federal level, on the distribution within each of the groups. Counties locally, regionally, have even taken different approaches in terms of within the various categories on who gets vaccinated. Kane County, Lake County, McHenry County, for example, have taken a different approach than we've seen in DuPage County on the available vaccinations. Some of the districts that we have seen have simply that have been able to vaccinate staffs are smaller staffs. Fewer people to be vaccinated, with a limited number of doses that are available per county, in our county per week. About 10 to 14,000 is what we've been averaging. Their smaller staffs with a smaller allotment are able to get vaccinated. And it's not, again, come because we haven't prepared, we haven't tried. Dr. Knowlton's on the phone and email multiple times every day with our contacts trying to secure this opportunity within our community. But the size of our staff, the number required, requires that we have a significant number of doses, and it haven't been allotted to us. Simple local partners in some of these smaller communities or smaller school districts have reached out and said, hey, I've got 200, 300, 500, we can do your staff. Again, here with our employees and contracted services, we're looking at about 3,500 plus eligible 1B people to be vaccinated. So Dr. Knowlton will continue a yeoman's effort in terms of trying to bring that here for us and for our staff. Communication, again, our primary resource will be our Return to Learn page, where we have an updated FAQ, which again will be updated by a lot of questions or comments that were made during public comment today, both the oral and submitted comments. Updated dashboard will continue to be done, and Talk 203 and additional messages will be sent out. Again, I would refer our families to previous Talk 203s regarding communication regarding a positive clinical finding or any surveillance testing that is being done. Encourage you, again, phone call comes from the county or from a school district, please answer that call and assist us with that contact tracing, which is an important part of previous and current updated CDC mitigation strategies. So with that, again, it's been a challenge for all of us, kind of navigating our way through this whole process, and I know for our families who have really put a lot into it and things that they haven't necessarily signed up for, and I recognize that. I don't want this to sound hollow or that it's without empathy or without sincerity. I get it. I understand, and I'm sorry for the frustration that you're experiencing. I am committed to getting us back fully 5 days, as many students as are willing to come in as soon as possible. We have a lot of layers that we have to work through, kind of like as I indicated through, I don't want to compare this to a snow day or anything like that, but there are a lot of multiple layers that we have to work our way through. We look at other districts, it's size of district, number of students, space available, number of staff. percentage of students who want in. I've heard, some, people have said, why is this district or that district fully in 5 days? Well, because 25 to 35% of their kids are opting for in-person, not the 72% that we're currently at. So there's a lot of things that are at play here in terms of getting ourselves into a return-to-learn plan with more in place. Our primary goal has been getting kids in class as often as possible, as quickly as possible within the guidance that we can. So that'll continue to be our driving force. With that, we'll take questions from the Board of Education.
Thank you for those comments and for the presentation. Questions from the Board of Education? Donna.
Thank you for that report. You mentioned accommodating students. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's my second question. We've gotten a large number of emails about accommodating students who do not want to return to take testing but want to participate in testing. Can we discuss or have some kind of public address to that?
So Dr. Knowlton will speak to that a little bit, but it's just again as part of our assessment strategy. We're approaching our window for a MAP NWEA MAP administration, which we use both for school improvement goal setting, benchmarking our progress, looking at achievement gaps, and there is some integrity to the administration of those assessments that have to be in place to ensure that we have reliable and valid data. Dr. Knowlton has worked with a number of families to try to provide accommodations. I'll let him talk a little bit further about some of the strategies that we're putting in place to try to do that.
Just a couple examples that we sort of talked through. I've talked individually with several families related to this topic. Of course, as the assessment person, I'm quite interested in testing as many students as possible, right? So we've extended the opportunity at either elementary, junior high level to conduct testing when there are fewer students in a building, for example, sometimes in an afternoon, sometimes on Mondays. So we've tried to open that up to try to minimize at least the perceived danger of being around other students. We've also taken a look at possibly doing this outdoors. We did this last year a little bit. Depending on the arrangement at the school itself, we could be in a position where we can make that available as well. Obviously, we would be following PPE, health and safety guidelines, PPE requirements, air purification, things like that. We are also offering people to wait and to do it when they feel comfortable. Maybe in 90 days when we do the second window, there'll be an opportunity, might be a different environment, the overall picture might look a little bit different, or even do it in the summertime as well with really no adverse consequence in terms of if there's concern about eligibility and placement for specific programming. I give you my word, I can honor that we would not, by delaying assessment towards eligibility for different types of programs, we're not going to disadvantage somebody because of that. We essentially do this type of evaluating on an ongoing way as new students continuously move into this district anyway. So those are just some of the examples of things that we've offered to try to come up with some kind of a compromise solution around maintaining test integrity and a standardized test experience.
Okay, thank you. It sounds like we have lots of options for them then. Okay. Because I don't think that was the case when we first started getting the abundance of emails, so thank you for that. My next question is Dan, you indicated that we were working on getting more students into in-person learning. Can you elaborate on that? Like when, who, will it continue on a gradual basis? What's the plan there?
Yeah, it's going to continue on a gradual basis. Our school improvement teams, our site-based teams, professional learning communities, administrators working with the leadership teams at their schools, identifying students in a number of categories who they think would benefit from more in-person instruction. For example, our instructional support teams, our special education teams, identifying students with IEPs to ensure that the services that they're required to receive are being offered and providing additional time when necessary. We did hear public comment earlier, we will be targeting early childhood, especially students with early childhood with IEP, to provide more opportunities for them. At the elementary level, again, students who are not demonstrating sufficient progress toward mastery of standards, reviewed by the professional learning communities, be offered more opportunities to come in. Junior high and high school level, again, reviews of DF lists, performance on benchmark assessments within their grade level, within their department, and then also students who not engaging, attendance is off, or would otherwise be identified by their teams as benefiting from additional in-person instruction. I would turn it to Chuck, Patrick, or Jane if there's any additional information that you would add, but it will be rolling. We should see, as as we continue to see positive in the sense of very good progress on all of our metrics in alignment with guidance that we do have the ability to increase more over time.
Okay. Oh, I just didn't know if they were going to, okay, so I guess that was the answer. Okay. So if parents feel that their students are in those categories and they're not being identified, we've been telling them to seek the input from their building administration. Is that correct?
First place a parent should always go is the teacher's teacher,
right.
is the student's teacher. Have that conversation with them. And then again, if they don't feel there's resolution through their teacher, working with a building administrator, if it's a case manager, perhaps if it's a special education student, or the building administration, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more and then I'll yield. I have a few more, but I think, and I'm not sure, I just want to make sure that there may be some misunderstanding with when we move into our next phase 4 of, in-person in learning. We've mentioned that that's when vaccines are readily available to return, and then we'll be returning to full person, but that means the current vaccines, not I know right now the vaccines that are available are not accessible for students 16 and younger. But when we're talking about vaccines being readily available, are we talking about the ones that we currently have, or because there's no indication?
So our stage 4 return to learn is aligned with the Illinois Department of Public Health's Restore Illinois plan and phase 5 with their language that vaccine is widely available. And so when we think about stage 4 for us means, I don't want to say return to normal, but return to education more as we knew it on daily, in-person, all students, and that's your option. So between where we're at right now and that stage 4, for us, aligned with the current IDPH in state of Illinois, Restore Illinois, that's what had the widely distribution is widely distributed to community and all individuals. However, as you've heard me say, we are looking at and continuing to target individual students who would benefit from. And we could see increases in the amount of students who attend, how often they attend, and as we have seen just most recently with CDC, there could be adjustments to the guidance. And so, we'll continue to adjust our return to learn plan in alignment with guidance that we get from the DuPage County Health Department. From the DuPage County Health Department standpoint, we are still in a substantial community transmission based on the number of cases per 100,000 that we're seeing, which puts them then in their recommendation that districts be fully remote. And so then we've got the Illinois Department of Public Health and their guidance that we're balancing and navigating that has not been updated yet by the federal CDC's recommendations. So that's what stage 4 meant for us, but you can expect to see more students in schools more frequently between now and then as well. Again, I'm optimistic. I want to be optimistic. I can't make promises. I want to be optimistic. We had parents ask about the fall. That's a lot of time between now and then. We're talking about at least 6 months between now and the beginning of next school year. It is my expectation. I am positive and optimistic that that's the position that we will be in, is that we will have a full in-person, but we have to continue to follow the metrics and the recommendations that were provided.
Thank you. I'll yield, and I have a few more after that.
Charles.
I just have one question. So Dan, earlier in your report, and thank you for that, by the way, you mentioned the surveillance testing was not quite at the 70% level. And if you said it, I apologize because I may have missed it. What level are we at?
Yeah, I don't have the most current. We had been over 50, but I don't have that current number. It has been increasing since we initiated it. So again, with the CDC's recommendation, again, for surveillance testing is just kind of that overview, right? And they're recommending around 10%. So well above that, and feeling again that this is an effective mitigation strategy for us. Part of a menu of mitigation strategies, not just the one and the only.
Yep, so over 50, less than 70. Right, somewhere in that range, but continuing to increase.
Correct.
What are some of the additional, I think you mentioned a few of them, but what are some of the additional things that we can do to encourage more levels of voluntary testing? Because again, while you mentioned it is just one of mitigation strategies, it is an important one, correct?
So I think the first thing that we're concerned about is ensuring that we are consistent in those that have already opted in. It's a new process. It's something, it's just, some have forgotten, some have just, not been in attendance on the day that their school is having samples collected. So I think our first step is to focus on consistency. Communications department, again, working with the school teams with a communication kit on kind of that. And so I think it's just more the ongoing awareness that this is a good mitigation strategy for us. Again, although we exceed the CDC standard of at least 10%, the more we have, the better sense that we have, which will give more families, I think, a sense of security that we are tracking this, we are watching this, and they get a better sense of what our community spread is.
And so, if I can play back, just so I make sure I understood what you said, that the focus, we're going to continue to try to get more people to opt in, right? But at the same time, we need to make sure that folks are consistent in their opting in. So in making sure that they're consistently providing the samples so that we can continue to monitor what's happening in the schools. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to understand.
Christine.
Just to go off of what Charles just asked, can you refresh my memory? The 70% for the surveillance testing goal, that's the company's recommendation for the, because if the CDC is 10%, that's a huge range, and I don't know.
Yeah, so when we initially contracted on this, that was what they had said, that would be the optimal. If you can get to a 70% level, you're gonna have a great sense of really what the spread is. But again, the CDC is looking at it as a one mitigation strategy, just on that idea of just the surveillance itself, to get a sense of just the potential presence, because the targeted group here is, again, those asymptomatic individuals, right? Those that are presenting no symptoms that may be carrying the virus. So that was a recommendation from the company and what they had seen in some of their early adopters at that number. So I'm sure that they'll look at recommendations that have come out from CDC right now and say that 70 number is pretty aggressive. We feel good about where we're at. Again, I think the emphasis for us is consistency with those that have opted in. We've been a little bit below on some of our testing days.
Okay, I'll go with a couple of my questions, then I'll head back to you. Okay, so thank you for your comments. I know that we had a lot of public comment tonight, and we had a lot by email as well, and we understand that this is extremely challenging for our parents, especially when they look at the needs faced by their kids. And so thank you for expressing sort of the processes that we're going through to get back to more in-person learning. Can you talk a little bit more about the CDC guidelines, specifically with regard to the variance between substantial and when there's more moderate or minimal?
I'll simply comment on the fact that one of the biggest mitigation strategies that the CDC continues to have in place really is the appropriate social distancing and the insurance of the 6 feet. And as we drop into a lower rate of spread within a community, they kind of soften it to as much as possible, but 6 feet continues to be the gold standard. So, again, that places some limitations on our ability to bring in, full classes 5 days a week, because of the size of our classroom, the number of students that we have in there. We are continuing to monitor attendance at each of our levels to determine that we've heard from, one of the questions the board asks a lot is what lessons have we learned from other districts. Some districts saw a high percentage of students selecting to be in person but actually not coming. And that has allowed them to bring in more students more frequently because of the numbers of students that they're putting within a classroom. So for us, obviously, we're still fairly early in our overall hybrid plan. So we've had great enthusiasm and excitement about getting back in school. So our numbers we've seen higher. We do see some variance classroom to classroom. So we'll continue to monitor that. But I think that's probably the biggest thing is that just the more we're controlling community spread, the more we can just rely on some of the more standard mitigation strategies that have been in place early on. the mask wearing. And again, we've seen talking about changing in guidance and guidelines. Early on when this virus first began, there was a question about whether there should be mask wearing. And I think we should wear masks. And then more specific about the type of mask. To the ideal way right now is 2 masks. So we're still kind of working through that, but that social distancing aspect continues to be the number one thing through the changes on the levels.
Do you expect that we'll get follow-up guidance from IDPH or ISB regarding some of these changes with regard to the CDC or?
I would hope so, and I would expect so. I think, school districts were, we're looking for greater consistency, greater communication, more timely communication from all of our agencies. I think we all share the same goal of getting more students in person as often as possible and as much as possible. We have seen, and I've commented regularly from this seat about the lack of consistency among the various levels, which puts us in a difficult situation. And so, and again, even more local guidance from our own council, in terms of things that we can be flexible with and things that we cannot be flexible with based on our opening ourselves up to scrutiny in case something happens. So we'll continue to monitor. I do expect that there will have to be some updates, and hopefully moving a little bit quicker is our movement through the various phases and stages based on continued I think positive trending regarding all of our metrics.
A similar question with regard to as more educators are vaccinated, if you expect there to be some additional guidance from our DuPage County Health Department and IDPH in terms of how that impacts?
Yeah, the initial guidance I need to get from them is how often they're going to make it, or when are they going to make it available on a consistent planned strategy and in a consistent and planned way, because that's currently not happening. Now, that being said, there's 275,000 individuals in DuPage County alone who qualify under 1B. And as long as we're only seeing 10 to 14,000 doses per week, that's going to take a long time to put into place. But yes, I do expect that as the vaccine becomes more widely distributed, not only among Group 1B, but then getting down into the more general population, that we may see some changes in recommendations from our agencies.
Okay, next question. I know that we have talked about this a little bit in the past, but continuing to look at academic integrity, can you just review for us the tools that we're utilizing to ensure that we're preserving academic integrity, whether students are participating online or if they're participating in class?
Our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Jane Willard, will address that for you.
Thank you.
Sure. So we have Hapara, Canvas, Go Formative, and we also have Mastering Manager in place. And the tools do different things. Some of the tools randomize assessment questions for students, and then others do monitor. They'll monitor how long students are attending so that we kind of can tell if a student's going very quickly through an assessment, that gives a red flag for a teacher, and they can actually then go in and spoil the assessment and administer that assessment to students. Our PLCs are working very hard. They have to, our students at home and online have different resources in front of them, right? And so we have to think about how do we pose questions now? So that's just one more thing that our educators have had to adjust to. So they can't always use the same assessment as they used last year, because right now everything might be an open note test for students. So we have to think about what is the evidence we're collecting and why are we collecting it and how are we collecting it for integrity? Now, will students, as they did in person, are some students going to test that boundary for us? They do, but we put all of our safeguards that we can in place to mitigate that as much as possible. Our tools are helping. Our students, especially now that they're in person, are knowing that those tools are being accessed, and especially at the high school and at the junior high, we're utilizing our deans and our counselors and our teachers to be contacting students and contacting families. Of course, we want our students to retake the assessment. We never want to say, okay, there was integrity here, and we don't want to assess you. We want to know what our students know and are able to do. So we have to give another assessment, but they are working very creatively to think about how do you pose a question so we don't have an integrity issue.
We have had and we have high standards for academic integrity in the school district. Our teachers work with their students to ensure that they understand our standards for integrity, academic integrity, and our teachers have worked collaboratively with their students to ensure that they meet those standards. That commitment hasn't changed just because the environment in which we're delivering instruction has changed. So it will continue to. The tools we use look a little bit differently, but as Jane referenced, tools especially like Hapara, Canvas are tools that have been used for a long time in our school district. And let's remember that we have been in the online and blended world for a number of years through ELO in our expanded offering of blended learning classes. So it's not new to our teachers.
Thank you for that. I think that's helpful to understand all the tools as well as the ongoing effort that the educators are making to look at things differently, just given this context. So thank you for that. Okay, that's 3 for me, so I'll go on. I know you have some additional ones. Before I go to you, does anybody else have additional questions? Okay, so Donna.
Okay, so back to the surveillance testing. I think somebody asked about what hurdles do we have that we can, that are, if we can get over, we can get more students into in-person learning. Is the surveillance testing something that if we had that 70% or higher of our students that are coming in person, is that something that would help us to be able to get more students into class?
No, not necessarily. Remember, surveillance testing is not diagnostic testing. It's an indication of identifying some of asymptomatic individuals. And again, we far exceed the current guideline or current standard by the CDC of at least 10%. More importantly is adherence to the other mitigation strategies, such as the social distancing, the 6 feet, mask wearing, and some of the other things that are in place. But no, not necessarily would the more widespread surveillance testing lead to progression through our return to learn plan.
Okay, and then my last question. I know that I'm getting a number of emails from families who, as they're hearing that we're working towards getting, fully in person, and as the vaccine's ready available, and that kind of tied to my last question, they're concerned that they're not ready to come back until a vaccine's available for their students. And so in our plan, it says that full-time e-learning will continue for students while we're in stages 1 to 3. Have we reconsidered that allowing for continued remote learning for those families who are super concerned about coming, if we come back sooner than they think?
Yeah, so currently no. Stage 4 for us really kind of, that's why I said there will be variances of our return to learn between stage 3 and stage 4, with more coming in. We will continue to offer online as an option, at least through the remainder of this school year. Then as we kind of transition into next fall, with the optimistic expectation that we will be more in person daily, bigger cohorts and groups of students. We'll kind of take some guidance on where the state is on whether we require it. I will remind our community that we have a fairly robust offering of online and blended courses right now, at least at the secondary level. And so again, it'll just kind of depend on where we're at that stage as we transition into the next year.
Okay, and then that was my last question, but now I have another one after you asked to answer that. You referred to the state, and I think that's what I'm hearing over and over again is that it's important that we get guidance from the state sooner rather than later because we don't know what their expectations are for the fall. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have anything concrete in terms of the next year, in terms of what guidance may be, what requirements we may have to offer. There were some public comments tonight, for example. I just want to say, I just want to address so to make sure we have accurate information. I've made no decision that we can't participate in interscholastic activities. I've made no decisions that we can't participate in sports. We followed the guidance in what's allowed under the Illinois Department of Public Health and the Illinois High School Association. As the parent of athletes, I get the importance of participating in sports. As a former athlete myself, I get that. That's not a local decision alone to be made. They're governed by bylaws and rules at the state level for that participation. We have participated in Illinois High School Association athletics and activities fully as allowed under the state of Illinois and the Illinois High School Association, and we will continue to do that.
And I would just add from my experience, that's been going on since the summer. Like the camps that we were allowed to participate in the summer, to the fullest extent, we've, as a district, have participated since the summer, correct?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, a good example are summer camps, because of the ability to be able to hold outside, greater social distancing, management of pods and cohorts of students within the guidelines. Absolutely, we have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, so just to reiterate in terms of the sports, we are participating on all of the winter sports that just began, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, and it's our intention to go forward with this spring.
We, that has been our position from as Ms. Wanke said, from the beginning of when they were allowed. We have allowed our students to participate in athletics and activities as fully allowed under the Illinois High School Association.
Yeah, I understand that they're working on some degree of looking at any kind of end of season, series. And I know that our intention would be that as allowed under COVID protocols, we participate in all those that are sanctioned by IDPH and IHSA, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, great. Okay. I know that you mentioned that we are already preparing for next year. Can you just talk a little bit about that, the kinds of things that we're doing in terms of preparing for next year? I know that we do have that guidance question out there from the state. I've heard several dialogues about advocating that guidance comes sooner rather than later, and I know that many of the organizations that we participate in, such as LEND, have already started speaking with our regulators in that regard. But can you just talk a little bit about the kinds of things we're doing as a school district to try to prepare?
Well, sure. I'll begin by what we do and have always done on a daily basis, and that's assess and understand where our students are at and what changes, modifications, improvements that we may need to make to our instructional model to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our kids. So that is ongoing through the work of our school improvement teams, our professional learning communities, our instructional support teams, our district leadership team, learning services, student services, Chuck, Stephanie, and all of their teams in terms of diving into what the needs are of our students. That being said, we continue to advocate through the Illinois Association of School Administrators, IASA, Illinois Association of School Boards, IASB, LEND, the Legislative Education Network of DuPage County, LUDA, the Large Unit District Association, all of those groups which serve as advocates on behalf of public education and public school districts in the state of Illinois on the importance of getting clear, consistent guidance with some ability for some local control and some flexibility based on local conditions, right? One school district in a rural part of the community may be able to implement things sooner or later. So the importance of local control is also important. So I would say we need, it's kind of that simultaneous tight and loose. We need some guidance early, very clear from all of our agencies at the state and local level to school districts, but then we need some flexibility within that guidance to be able to consider our local conditions to make the best decisions that we can.
Thank you, that was very helpful. Okay, I know that we are working on additional tools to help our students and families cope with loss and isolation due to COVID with our program that we have ongoing. Can you talk a little bit about, I know that we were offering video modules that are on our website, as well as 3 community sessions. I know the last one is coming up this week. Can you just talk about the participation in that, what you hope to gain from it, and what our next steps are going forward, both for students and families in terms of
Sure, I can certainly say, at least just on a very high level, I don't know if Ms. Mondini's been able to get the more specific numbers regarding attendance, but we have had a very favorable response to our Optimistic School Community program that we launched. And again, the intent of that really was to help our families and our students, as well as our staff and community, really kind of respond to the conditions that we've been placed in as a result of COVID. It aligns strongly with our social and emotional learning program, and it focuses again on mental health, mental well-being, resiliency, dealing with ability to make social connection in these times of distance and separation. It's like Seneca can talk a little bit about what some of the numbers are, but then I know she's not here for this. She's wearing orange. She's going to be here to talk about DuPage Children's Museum later, but one of our leads on the work that we're doing is Jennifer Donatelli, our Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and maybe she'll make a couple of comments about kind of what's happened and what some potential next steps are for us. So Seneca first, and then Jenny, please.
Absolutely. We've had up to 400 people register, which is really fantastic, and we know that every night it's difficult for some of our families to actually get on after they register. But we saw it jumping anywhere from about 180 to 280 at the last session, and that was people coming in and out throughout it, so our numbers aren't quite, I don't know how many individual people, but mostly we saw about 180 were on and participating during that second session, and about 150 at the first session. So we're really hopeful that those 400 registrants that did it last for the second session will come back, bring a friend, and participate.
And what kind of feedback are we getting in terms of whether or not what we're providing is helpful for them in terms of supporting their students and supporting themselves in this effort to try to be, to cope with the loss that their students are facing and to cope with.
I'm going to let
the
Jenny
challenge.
talk a little bit about that, but I mean,
Yeah,
overall
okay.
feedback has been extremely positive.
I was just going to say, you can see it on people's faces when you're on the Zoom. I mean, very enthusiastic. They're really jazzed up during it. So I have to believe that they're taking that and going and spreading it,
We've seen through these sessions, we've seen families sit together around the dining room table to participate in this event. So it's, I think if anything, it's also just what I hope people take away from it, and Jenny can talk more about this, is self-care and the importance of really understanding what your individual needs are during a time like this, and what are some potential strategies to be able to address those. Jenny?
Yes, and I just wanted to add that what our thought partners, Devin Hughes, has been able to do is give some practical, real-life strategies that you can implement with your family or even just individually, just to cope with the challenging times, knowing that people are going through difficulties, not saying that everything is roses and happiness, but that even through difficult times, you need to find things that you are grateful for and, show gratitude towards others and find things that just, find the positive even in those challenging moments. The feedback that we have received from either staff members or even former family members that have reached out, they enjoy the resources that have been linked on our website. Those videos, those 5 to 10 minute videos are short little snapshots of some specific strategies, and then there's links for activities that you can engage in as well. So we've been receiving very positive feedback from people that have been accessing those resources.
In terms of next steps, and we'll continue with learning at our district leadership team level, which then empowers our district and building leaders to go to the places where they work, whether it be their school building, their department, or other areas, to work with their staff, other stakeholders within the community that they work with, to really continue to build those skills moving forward. I see this again aligns very closely with our ongoing social emotional learning work that we have been doing. That now is kind of really looking at, this is the next version. This is like 2.0 of it, right? Another addition to it to continue to move us forward and continue to keep mental wellness, social emotional health at the forefront of what we're doing.
And I know you said this last board meeting, but I feel like it was such an important reminder. I have participated as well. I'm using the tools. Some things work well with my kids, some things not so good. I mean, it's every family is different. I think a lot of positive things, but I liked what Dan had to say last time in terms of this is opening a conversation, and we have lots of resources available. And for some, families, this might open a conversation, and then we would have our counselor resources and other resources in the school. And so it's just a starting point for some families to continue sort of opening that conversation about their students' needs and how to meet them. So I appreciate the efforts that we're doing to have that conversation with parents, to offer the tools, in addition to highlight the fact that we have so many other resources as well if there's additional resources necessary. Okay, any other questions or comments from board members regarding Return to Learn? Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Charles.
I know that early on, there was some feedback that we received about the block scheduling and things like that. Question, do we have any update on how that's being absorbed now?
Yep, Jane, you want to talk about it?
Sure, I'll take it real quick. We don't have any initial or the most recent was what we received in December, which was pretty overwhelmingly positive. In the hybrid, in our hybrid setting, because of our pods and because of our social distancing, the block scheduling absolutely is working well within that framework of the mitigation strategies that we have. I think our high school students and our high school teachers are actually starting to really appreciate the time they have, especially in person, and they're getting better at navigating that environment so it's not online the entire time. We have not heard any adversity to the block scheduling in the last few weeks as we've transitioned to hybrid. We are having conversations about possibly doing some more investigation and getting some feedback from our students and our families the more we're in our hybrid model.
Okay, so nothing, you haven't heard any additional or any negative things since folks?
No, yeah, so I had an overall feedback since we transitioned to the actual in-person hybrid, much more positive. More of the concern that we heard were when we had transitioned, when we thought we were coming back first to that schedule with the length of time online in those periods, but since we have now in person again, as Jane mentioned, that supports us in some key mitigation strategies regarding social distancing and cohort and pod management, because it reduces the number of people in a building like this to ensure that we're able to, again, one of the most important things that, again, also reaffirmed with the most recent CDC guideline is the importance of contact tracing. And so being able to control and having a better sense of the numbers of individuals in any space at any time really supports that contact tracing. So going back to one of the earlier questions, I'm sorry I put it in that response, but contact tracing continues to be one of the most effective and most important mitigation strategies we're using to ensure that we're able to get more students back in person.
So if I can paraphrase what you're saying, it all has to fit and work together. I mean, it's all part of a kind of a, okay. And I do remember that a couple of weeks back when we were first looking at the block scheduling, there were some concerns expressed, and I believe at the time it was suggested that we wait, see how it plays out, because it was based on good evidence that brought us to that conclusion that would be a good thing, and it sounds like that's what's playing out. Is that accurate?
That's a fair assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I think we got a lot of the questions, started a discussion about that. I know you mentioned that our frequently asked questions will continue to be updated based on additional questions that we may have received through public comment. Okay, so we will go on then to President's report. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped. 8.05, data privacy update. Forgive me, going too fast.
So our Chief Information Officer, Roger Brunell, is going to provide an update to the Board of Education on new student data privacy laws, how it impacts us, and just really get kind of a head nod from the Board of Education about moving forward with standard data privacy agreements in place. Roger?
Good evening. Tonight we'd like to take a few moments to share with the Board of Education and the community some information about a new Illinois law that will take effect in July of this year regarding student data privacy, along with the implications to our district, as Mr. Bridges said. Next slide, please. Our goals tonight are to familiarize the board with the new student data privacy law, and also gain approval to move forward with a standardized data privacy agreement, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The mandate of the new law, which is called the Student Online Privacy Protection Act, or SOPA, puts in place additional safeguards for both vendors and public school districts in Illinois to protect student private data. Next slide. Next slide. We may ask, what is student data? And there are so many elements of things that can be considered student data. We put up on this slide just some of the samples and examples of student information and data. I'm not going to read through all these, but you can see there are many elements that could be information about a student, information about their address, test results, grades, etc. And these are all things that can directly be used to identify a student either alone or when assembled with other data elements. If you notice, there are a few asterisks on this slide. Those are records that are considered student information, private information, but our district does not collect any of those type of records. Next slide, please. Student data can reside in many of the systems and applications that a school district uses to provide and support education. Here are some examples of these type of systems and applications that contain student data. This is certainly not an all-inclusive list, but just a sample of some of the larger district-wide systems we have in place. Student data can exist in many other applications as well, such as those here, as well as individual applications that may be in use by our teaching staff that have either been purchased by the district or can be available as freeware. That's why as we move forward towards compliance with this new law, it's going to be important that we identify all of the places where student data may exist. Next slide, please. Since many, if not all, of the solutions the district uses are provided by outside vendors who have developed and support these solutions, the new law puts in place several requirements for these vendors in order to protect student data. Let's go through these. Vendors are required to enter into a written agreement with each school district that contains a listing of the categories of types of student information used by the vendor, a statement of the product or service being provided, a statement by the vendor that they will adhere to FERPA standards, a description of how things will be managed if, in the event of a breach of this data, that the vendor is responsible for, providing notification of parents or students what data was breached, provide credit monitoring to students whose data was breached, handling any legal fees, audit costs, etc., protecting the district against the breach, and providing other notifications or fulfilling any other requirements adopted by ISB or state federal laws. Next slide, please. Vendors are also required to implement and maintain reasonable security practices to protect student data from unauthorized access, destruction, use, or modification or disclosure. They are also responsible to delete student information within a reasonable time period, and that's usually defined with the contract that we have with each vendor. They also must publicly disclose information about collection, use, and disclosure of student information, along with the terms of service agreement, privacy policy, or similar documents. Next slide, please. Vendors are prohibited. I think you are not where I'm at. There you go. Thank you. Vendors are prohibited from engaging in any targeted advertising to students, creating a profile of an individual student by assembling any of the personal data about that student, selling or renting an individual student's information, disclosing student information with the exception of some things you can see here that are due to legal or regulatory compliance, judicial processes, etc. Next slide, please. For us, the school district's requirements are pretty clear. Here are the most important changes in the law. First, we must enter into a signed data privacy agreement with each and every vendor in which we are sharing student data with. These agreements must be posted on our district website for public viewing. In these agreements, there must be a listing of the type of student data being used by the vendor, a description of that service they are providing, a statement indicating that they will adhere to all current data privacy laws, a list of any subcontractors they may use that may have access to this information, along with contact information. The district must also publish on our website any known and reported breaches of student data by any vendor that we work with. Lastly, we must ensure we maintain reasonable procedures and practices to protect student data that meet or exceed industry standards, which we currently already do as a district. Next slide, please. The rules directed at school districts have been clearly defined as what we are prohibited from doing. District 203 has always taken student data privacy seriously and followed these rules prior to them being formally put into law. These clarifications are that we are not allowed to sell, rent, trade student information, or disclose any student data to anyone other than the student's parents, school personnel, board members, state board, unless it was required by law, required to comply with regulations, or in protection of the safety of others as required by law enforcement. Next slide, please. As stated in the previous slide, the district must enter into a data privacy agreement with each vendor that they share student data with. With the many vendors all the districts in Illinois work with, and the many school districts that work with them, it would be a very large undertaking to have individual agreements signed between every district and every vendor that they use. In an effort to help streamline this process and reduce the workload on all involved, the Student Data Privacy Consortium has been working with various states over the past several years to develop a common data privacy agreement that both the vendors and school districts can sign. They've already created common privacy agreements for other states such as California, Oregon, Maine, and others. Now they've created a similar version for the state of Illinois school districts to use that contain Illinois-specific requirements. The Learning Technology Center of Illinois has been leading the efforts to get school districts to adopt this particular agreement. We've put a link to in this presentation to this agreement as well. How this would work is that both the vendor and one of the Illinois school districts will agree to a 3-year term that covers all of the requirements of the new SOPA law, as well as broader nationwide standards. This agreement contains all information required by law stated in all of the earlier slides. There's a special section for districts and vendors to put additional requirements by either party if that's desired. How this helps school districts and vendors is that one school district can initiate getting an agreement signed with a vendor, and then they become the originating local education agency with that vendor. After that particular agreement is signed, any other school district that would like to agree to that exact same term or agreement created by the originating local education agency can then piggyback onto that agreement by just signing a short Exhibit E of the agreement and sending that to the vendor. That school district then becomes a subscribing local education agency and are bound by the same terms as the originating district. The reason for developing such a mechanism is to eliminate each school district and vendor having to negotiate all of the individual agreements amongst themselves, thus reducing the time and cost for everyone. Keep in mind this agreement is focused on data privacy requirements. The district may still have other agreements or contracts with the vendor that cover other legal needs, such as payment terms, termination language, etc. The new agreement, however, will supersede any data privacy language in any of the contracts we currently already have with those vendors. Next slide, please. The National Data Privacy Agreement has been reviewed by our legal counsel and been approved for use. The Illinois Association of School Boards recommends that we present this agreement to the Board of Education for your approval prior to the district using this as our mechanism for fulfilling our compliance requirements. By giving us your approval to use this standard agreement, it eliminates the need for the board to review every single agreement that we are required to enter into because the same terms will be required by all vendors. Additionally, the district will need to determine which personnel are authorized to sign the agreements, and typically that's the person who leads the technology, such as myself, at each school district. Upon approval of the use of this agreement, we plan to begin working with all of our vendors to get this agreement signed. As we get an agreement signed, our plan is to post these agreements on the Illinois Student Data Privacy Alliance website. This gives us 2 benefits. The website provides us a district-dedicated page that we can then link to our district website to meet the compliance requirements of posting these agreements. The second benefit here is that when using this website, we can begin to leverage work that other school districts have done to get agreements signed with vendors, and we may also be in partnership with them by piggybacking on their agreements. Additionally, the benefits to other school districts is that they can leverage our work as well. By combining everyone's efforts, this should help speed the process up and reduce cost for time for everyone involved. To ensure we're in complete compliance, we'll be utilizing a network scanning tool to verify the list of applications that are currently using student data. We've also begun to build a communication campaign for our staff about the new requirements, as well as develop a new process for requesting any new applications in the future. Due to the new requirements, we will need to ensure any application being considered by use for our staff meets these data privacy requirements. Finally shown here is our timeline that will get us to compliance by July 1st. As a side note, from talking to many other districts, many are just starting to embark on this, and due to the COVID situation and all of the work that's imposed upon districts, many are behind the game here. And our first thought was that maybe the state would relax potentially that date, but we're going to act as if it's not going to be relaxed and push ahead anyway. So there's a lot of districts that are in the exact same place we are. In the next month, we'll complete the identification of our current applications and start beginning communications to staff. Over the following couple months, we'll be focused on contacting vendors and getting these agreements signed. Prior to the deadline, we'll be completing the development of all content required by this new law and post to our website. Lastly, when the 21-22 school year starts, we will again communicate to our staff the rule of the road and the new processes that will be in place for registering new applications to make sure they're in compliance. Thank you for your time, and we'll take any questions.
So just again, before we begin with questions, this is brought to you really as an update. As Roger indicated, legal counsel has reviewed this, has come very comfortable with this. IASB has recommended that the board be advised / approve in a sense of comfortable moving forward, not requiring formal Board of Education action. So again, this has been through a pretty thorough review. Thank you, Roger, for the very detailed information. So Roger can take questions from the Board of Education, and unless concerns are expressed, and the board would be comfortable, we will move forward with this process.
Great, thank you for that review and for your comments in terms of the process. Questions from the Board of Education? Can you just talk for a second about the work that you're going to be doing with teachers? I know that you said there's an education campaign that you're going to be working on. Why we're doing that in that way?
Sure. And we're going to work with our peer departments in the district here, because at this point, we have over 100 applications in use by the district that we know about. And those are usually the enterprise-wide ones, the larger scale ones. But there could be many, many more that teachers are currently using. And due to the fact that they've been put in a situation with COVID, they've looked for tools and enhanced them, what they can use in the classroom. And that's understandable. The key is that we look at those and work with the teachers to understand what tools they're using. And then it's a simple decision as, does that tool have student private data in it? If so, we have to work with that vendor to get an agreement signed. If not, not a problem. And we hope that this scanning tool will help us realize how much other tools are being used, and if there are opportunities to consolidate. Maybe a tool works great for one group, it could be used further, or maybe there's not enough usage to pay for the license, those type of things. But that'll take a lot of individual work once we scan and identify.
It does sound like this is a lot of work, and we are grateful that you're ahead of the game so that we'll be in compliance by July 1st. Are there additional questions from the board? Okay, then as I understand it, then that will mean we'll go ahead and go forward with making these agreements to protect student privacy and educating our staff and working on those additional ones. So thank you for the review.
Thank you.
We've got okay. All right, great. So we'll go on now to item 8.06, President's Report. I just want to note for our board that Christine and I participated in the National School Boards Institute on Equity. And then previous week, it was a great presentation about some of the work that's going on in various school boards throughout the nation. Just looking at the same goals aligned with what we've been doing in our comprehensive equity plan, and just really talking about best practices and ways to update policy. And I thought it was a great event. Anything from you, Christine?
Well, I would agree. It was a good learning opportunity. So any of those conferences that NSBA puts on, or even IASB, whether it's a larger conference or something equivalent to a session or two, are always helpful just to hear what others are doing, and then just sparks your own thoughts and ideas.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of a great opportunity for us to participate, just given that it was virtual. And so we didn't, normally their Equity Institute is in Washington, D.C., and so that was great to be able to participate just from home. I do want to mention to the Board of Education to please check your calendars and look at the website for the National School Boards Association. I believe that their virtual event is going to be April 8th through 10th. I know that one of the keynotes of that National School Boards Organization presentations is Sean Aker, who is the person that's been working with our district in terms of the program for resiliency. So do check your calendars and let Susan know if you wish to participate in that, because I think that they have a reduced rate for school teams, and that we have a deadline coming up in terms of registration. So let her know if that's something that you'd like to participate in. Again, this is an opportunity. I know numerous of us were planning to participate in the National School Boards Association conference last year when it was in Chicago, but usually it's difficult for us to get all the way to wherever location they are. So this is an opportunity to participate virtually that is, I think, something for us to take advantage of if we have the time. So, okay. Going on from that, item 8.07, Board of Education reports. Are there any Board of Education reports this evening? Christine?
Just a fun update from NEF. That's one of my committees this year, and that group it's a good time considering we meet at 7 a.m. on Thursday mornings, but it's always, it's good to be with them and to hear and see all the ways that they're supporting our students and their families. They haven't skipped a beat through all of COVID. They continue to, look for ways to support families. They look for resources to help them in their mission. And what I wanted to make the community aware of is, in lieu of their annual breakfast this year, which usually takes place towards the end of March, and that's a huge fundraiser for them. And it's a big event with lots of community members. They have decided to do a fundraiser in coordination with Dietas. So for $30, you can, a $30 donation to NEF will get you a cinnamon roll delivered to a person of your choice, and it's okay if you choose yourself, on March 6th. So the deadline to donate and sign up for the cinnamon roll is February 19th. So you got a few days to figure out who is so deserving of this. And March 6th, it will be hand delivered to that person in the Naperville 203 addresses. It'll be hand delivered by an NEF volunteer, and that's how they're trying to just bridge the gap for what they would normally raise during that breakfast. So think of somebody who's special to you, and know that at the same time, you're helping NEF in their mission with our students and families.
Wonderful. Thank you, Christine, and thanks for representing us there at NEF. I think you and Charles are our reps for this year, so thank you for that. Okay, so we will go on then to discussion without action. We do not have discussion without action this evening, so we will move to item 10, discussion with action, and we are on item 10.01, general and optional fees.
Yeah, at the February 1st Board of Education meetings, our Chief Financial Officer, Mike Francis, presented a recommendation to the Board of Education regarding general and optional fees for fiscal year 2022. We have no new information to present this evening. Recommend the board approve the administration's recommendation of the approval of FY22 school fees as presented. Be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Questions from the Board of Education? Okay, I don't see any questions. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I move to approve item number 10.01, general fees and optional fees as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong,
Nay.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes, and just as a reminder, we will remind our community that though we passed the general fee, we have also waived that fee through a fee credit. So anybody who paid that fee last year will not be paying the general fee this year.
No, we can't necessarily say that it'll be credited back to their account. It'll depend on.
Right.
Yeah.
Credited back to their account. Yeah, okay. All right, so moving on to item 10.02, high school course fees.
Annually, the administration provides a recommendation to the Board of Education regarding high school course fees. Those were presented to the Board of Education by administration at the February 1st meeting. We have no new information to present this evening. I would recommend that the board approve proposed high school course fees for 2021-2022 as presented.
Questions from the Board of Education? Okay, I don't see any questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve item 10.02, high school course fees.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kush,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Leong,
Nay.
Gerke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on to item 10.03, Career 203 update.
as required by the collective bargaining agreement between the Naperville 203 Board of Education and Naperville Unit Education Association annually. A joint committee of administrators and NUEA members review the Career 203 program guide and make recommendations to the Board of Education for revisions, updates, or changes. At the February 1st Board of Education meeting, Director of Career 203, Brian Valek, presented the recommendation to the Board of Education. We have no new information to present to you this evening. I recommend you approve the change to Career 203 is presented on February 1st. Our Chief Human Resources Officer, Bob Ross, can respond to any, along with me, can respond to any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you for that. I know we had a wonderful presentation on all the new things that we're working on for Career 203 in our last board meeting. Does any board member have any additional questions with regard to Career 203? Okay, I see no questions, so I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve item number 10.03, Career 203, as updated, as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Gerke. Aye. Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Leong.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on in our agenda to item 10.04, DuPage Children's Museum Agreement.
We know that an exemplary school district is the result of collaboration among students, staff, parents in our community, and one of our strongest partners in this community is the DuPage Children's Museum. We've partnered with them in a number of initiatives over the years. We have an exciting potential partnership with the DuPage Children's Museum to support K-5 STEM learning in our district. Our Director of Curriculum, Jennifer Donatelli, is here to update the Board of Education, and then Ms. Donatelli, Ms. Willard will be able to respond to any questions from the Board of Education. The recommendation is going to be that the Board of Education approve this partnership as presented by Ms. Donatelli, and just based on our timeline, normally this would come earlier, or one meeting with action, and so, but we're really excited about this partnership and need to get moving forward. But again, we'll be receptive and responsive to questions that you have this evening. Jenny?
Thank you, thank you very much, Dan. There you can. Good evening. Tonight, Learning Services is excited to update the Board of Education on a partnership opportunity with DuPage Children's Museum in which they will provide STEM learning experiences to all K-5 students on Monday afternoons in April and May of this school year. We would like to seek Board of Education approval on the partnership proposal that is uploaded to Board Docs. During this partnership, DuPage Children's Museum facilitators will design STEM labs for our elementary students that align to our District Trimester 3 science curriculum. These NGSS-aligned STEM labs will spark curiosity and promote critical thinking through hands-on discovery and provide academic enrichment through a virtual learning experience. Students will be empowered to be the primary drivers of their own learning by building, making, engineering, and experimenting through engaging lessons and challenges. DuPage Children's Museum will also support PI Plus by providing Trimester 3 instructional support in the area of science. Students will be posting evidence of their learning through Canvas and/or Seesaw. This exciting opportunity aligns to our district STEM plan by providing students authentic STEM experiences provided by expert partners in the community and promotes critical thinking and problem solving in the remote setting. These pictures from Naper Elementary highlight 2nd and 4th grade students that engage in a Building Bridges STEM experience with DuPage Children's Museum in December. They had a fantastic time putting their problem solving and creative ideas to the test. This partnership and feedback from Naper School prompted us to investigate ways to engage all district K-5 students in a similar opportunity with the museum. We are so excited to expand these hands-on learning experiences to all elementary students in our district. This proposed timeline communicates when students would be participating in the remote STEM experiences by grade level. This learning will be part of the school day. Students will engage in their morning remote work with their classroom teachers and will log back in with a Zoom link to participate in the STEM activities in the afternoon. Hands-on learning supplies will be packaged and distributed in advance to all students in order to fully engage in the STEM labs. Here is an overview of the budget and the funding source for this partnership. Every elementary school will participate and the cost will be covered by the Learning Services Fiscal Year 2021 department budget. We are grateful for this partnership with the museum and their innovative thinking and STEM labs that they can provide our students. We know students will benefit both academically and social-emotionally from this experience. I will now open the floor up to any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation about this exciting new partnership. Questions from the board? Oh, Joe.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. Very excited about this new partnership. You mentioned the supplies. Those are going to be available at the schools for pickup. They're being supplied by the Children's Museum.
Yes, we actually have a lot of the supplies already on hand in our instructional resource center, so we're going to package those and distribute them to the buildings. Students will be able to take them home. If they're in-person learners and if they are our virtual learners, we will have a designated time for families to pick up those supply packs.
Great. I'm glad that everybody's going to have the opportunity without having to dip into family resources.
Yes.
Thank you.
Charles.
So, 2 words, love this. So I'm sharing Joe's enthusiasm for it. But quick question, how are we planning to measure the impact that this program will have within the district?
That's a great question. We are going to be having students in each of the STEM labs. They're going to be creating a product that they're going to upload to CSAR Canvas, and that way the DuPage Children's Museum facilitators and also the teachers will be able to view that product and ensure that it aligns to the lesson objectives. We'll also be gathering engagement evidence by looking at the attendance through Zoom. And also working with the DuPage Children's Museum on potentially providing some type of a feedback or survey. They would like feedback on the success of these lessons. What's really exciting is that DuPage Children's Museum is tailoring these specifically for District 203 to align to our science curriculum. So they would also like to get feedback on what they're designing as well. So we're working with them on what that opportunity would look like.
Well, we're excited, if I can, just to piggyback on top of that, just while we're excited about the alignment to the Next Generation Science Standards, our STEM initiatives, this is also responsive to some of the feedback we've heard from our elementary parents about providing additional scheduled, synchronous learning opportunities on the Monday that is the e-learning day for all. So, while we talk about the importance of metrics and measuring the impact also, this is also another added benefit of just providing additional engaged time for our learners.
Right. I think that's great. So I think it meets that need. One of the things I'm also particularly excited about on this is that getting that level of exposure to kids early and engaging this portion of their minds earlier on in their academic career, I think is interesting. I'd be curious to understand if we are considering or would consider measuring level of interest that kids have or understanding or something around these areas, STEM areas, pre and post this, because I think that one of the things that's great is by generating this level of exposure, it just opens up a whole world. And when you see kids engaging with, not realizing that some of the things that they find are really cool about some of this stuff is, oh, that's science? I didn't know that was science. And so I think it'd be really great to see if we are successful in spurring additional interest pre-post. So just wondering if that's something we're considering looking at measuring as well.
I would need to think about how we would actually measure, how we would gather that data. But one of the ways that we could do that even next year is looking at how many students engage in some of our STEM clubs and activities that we do throughout the Learning Commons to see if the engagement increases as a result of engaging in some of these hands-on experiences.
So if you saw an increase in enrollment in some of these clubs and things like that, yeah, that's cool. No, it's up to you to figure out how to measure it. I just think it'd be great to understand that level of engagement and if we're moving the needle on that. Thank you.
Donna?
So I think I just want to go back to what you were saying, Dan, about how we are trying to work on engaging more in synchronous learning. And I think it's important to understand that, as my colleagues have said, and as you've said, Dan, we understand how difficult this is for people, and we do hear all the things that are being presented to us, and it's finding that compromise. And this is one of those areas where we've found a compromise to be able to help in a wonderful way and a wonderful opportunity with DuPage Children's Museum. So thank you for that, because I think it's important. It is evidence that we're hearing and moving in the right direction. So thank you.
I'm really excited about this for so many reasons. Number one, it's exciting to see that additional rigor and something different and exciting for those Mondays. I think as well, our students have not participated in any, normally they would do field trips, they would have all different kinds of experiences where they would go out and see something different. And so I know that this is part of our curriculum, and I'm glad that it's working in with our curriculum, but I also like it for the idea that it sort of helps with those types of experiences that they haven't had this year. And on that note, I'm wondering, I know our students do all different kinds of field trip type modules with individuals, with organizations like Naperville Settlement and other community partners. I know, even some of the museums in Chicago. Are we working on plans with any of these additional organizations to, if these are successful, to keep going forward with additional types of opportunities like that?
Yes. It would be fantastic if we could find additional ways to bring some of these learning experiences to students, especially during those Monday afternoons at the elementary level. So we'll continue to, engage in even our local partnerships to see what opportunities there may be to do that.
Yeah, and we're not in a position to report this evening, but I know that our principals and working with a district administration have been looking at as we're, seeing, positive trends in terms of where we're at with local metrics on, what additional opportunities can we be providing. So we'll continue to work through that, monitor the metrics, and as we get some, more concrete plans in place, we'll keep the board updated on those.
And let me just clarify, do you mean more additional opportunities for Monday generally?
No,
or do
just
you mean,
in general.
Okay, great. So I think
Again,
that,
I'm intentionally vague right now because we're real early on
Right.
some of the planning.
okay, but I'm appreciative of the effort to, again, increase that rigor and increase the opportunities for our students who are, have lost lots of other opportunities this year just due to the COVID restrictions. I think that this is a great opportunity, and I'd love to see additional like that, so thank you. Okay, so if there's no additional questions, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of item, geez Louise, what item am I at? 10.04, DuPage Children's Museum Agreement as presented.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kush,
Aye.
Leong,
Aye.
Kuzminski,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on in our agenda to item 11, old business. We do not have old business this evening. So we'll move to item 12, new business. We do not have new business this evening. So we'll move to item 13, upcoming events, and then go to item 1301, schedule of events.
Invitation to members of our community to join us for our Optimistic School Community Dialogue on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock. Please go to the website to register and look forward to this ongoing conversation that we have been having. I'd highlight in addition to the board calendar, on Monday, February 22nd, Board of Education closed session is scheduled for the purpose of a selection of a member. So the board will be meeting in closed session with candidates for that position. Next regular Board of Education is scheduled for Monday, March 1st.
Okay, great. Thank you for highlighting all of those items and for highlighting as well our continuing process in terms of board selection for our board vacancy. All right, so we'll move on then to item 14, adjournment. Item 1401, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move approval, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Kush,
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Kuzminski.
Aye.
Okay, the motion